We're just choking on our tea. Welcome back.
The things that go on during the commercial break, that's the things you should know. Due to this woman here.
Neeson in naughty boots.
Yes.
Causing trouble. And Olympian Chris Akabusi in his naughty laugh.
Yeah.
Here to entertain us. And we are going through the papers one last time.
Let's do you know what I want to start with? Sorry. A good debate to get us going. In the Telegraph, men let women pick up the slack on housework when both work from home. So the suggestion is that given the chance, men would happily let women do the majority of housework.
This is it. This is 2 independent studies and reported in the Personal Psychology Journal, so I read these sort of things. And they have shown that when both partners are working from home, that the women end up doing most of the housework. And I actually have to say that in my house that's not true. Thank you, darling.
Okay.
He does everything. He looks after me. He cooks. He shops. He does everything. He's brilliant. However, most of you are rubbish.
Mrs. Pierce.
Mrs. Pierce, well, Mr. Pierce is also brilliant. He is not particularly domesticated in terms of tidiness, but we share the roles. He does the grim stuff like the bins in the garden, and I'll do the laundry. He does a lot of the cooking, so I haven't got...
And you do sexy night.
Her
words, not mine. Her words, not mine. But I reckon, Mr. Akabusi, you being ex-military, you're well house trained. No?
Oh, definitely not. Mr. Akabusi lives on his own for a reason. He's Mr. Untidy. Yeah, I'm awful. No, I'm not.
You want your golf course to look immaculate, but your house is a tip.
Yeah, because I'm the only one who lives in my house, so it doesn't matter what it looks like.
I thought you'd be polishing your shoes, arranging the cutlery drawer. I thought you'd have everything military precision.
Absolutely. I mean, I've got a beautiful garden, but then I've got a gardener.
Oh my God!
Okay. So if we take a vote on this, is housework shared equally between men and women? You would say, Dawn?
I would say for most couples, probably not. I would also like to point out these surveys were done in China and Korea.
Okay.
I didn't want to
I would
the
say
story.
definitely Mrs. Holmes does everything and more. Yeah.
Oh dear. I would say it's probably a generational thing. I don't think guys can get away with it anymore.
When I was married, my ex-wife was a German, and she was absolutely picobello sauber, absolutely totally clean, everything perfectamondo.
It's a wonderful, attractive quality, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Oh, yeah, absolutely. You love a woman that can take care.
My wife, she did bring up our youngest son, and she said, I am not going to bring another useless man. So he cooks and cleans.
Well done, Ruthie.
Team Ruth, go girl.
Absolutely. I drill my son as well and helping out. Right, let's get into the news then. Chris, you want to talk about Sajid Javid's call facing backlash. What's he calling for?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, Sajid Javid himself was once the Secretary for Health, and he's having a look at the health system we've got now. It was once the envy of the world. 75 years ago, it was a bastion. It was forward thinking, and we've got an affinity with our NHS, but sadly, it's not working. And so we have got to have that uncomfortable discussion around how do we recalibrate it for the 21st century, even though that we're 5% or 20% already into it. And his idea is, looking around in Ireland, for example, if you have an emergency you have to pay 75 euros. In Norway, you pay £20 to see your GP. And so he's floating the idea and seeing how it would work here in the United Kingdom. But the argument against it is a slippery slope into privatisation. It affects the poorest, and for those who at least can afford to pay, the poorest people will think twice about going to their GP or going to hospital, and a sort of mild illness could become chronic. So you can see some of the challenges it's got. And then another one will be, okay, that's very good, but what's going to be the cost to put the system into place, and does the cost outweigh the benefit? So there are lots of arguments against it, but we have to have an argument about NHS.
Absolutely. I mean, the population has grown so much since it was created in 1948, and we age so much longer. Is it sustainable to be free for all of life, from birth to death?
And the answer is, it's not.
And it's not.
No, it's not.
It's just not. I think you have to agree on that.
So you think most people would be up for some sort of small cost if they can, if it was affordable to do them, means tested.
Well, yeah, I think so. But then again, you'd have a challenge with mean testing, because if you're going to fly in colours, great. But what if you are on the border? Do you would it become stigmatised? Would people know those who couldn't?
And plus, would it put people off going?
To see the doctors?
If you had to pay, I don't know, say 10, 20 quid to go and see a GP appointment, but it meant you got that GP appointment within a day or so, rather than 3 weeks, I'd more than happily do that system. But if you were borderline, would it put you off going?
Well, that's exactly what I said. So someone who's on borderline, who's got mild symptoms, might not go, and unfortunately, by the time they get to it, it could be a chronic, devastating position. So that's the argument against it.
OK, let's turn our attention to the Mirror now, Dawn. Tory MP's vile rant at food bank users. This is about Lee Anderson. What's he been up to?
Well, this is an ongoing saga, isn't it? Tory MP Lee Anderson is a former miner, and he has said that there is a whole industry now behind the food bank situation, and he said that in a lot of cases, people using food banks are wasting their money on fags, booze and non-essential and non-priority debts, Sky TV or Virgin Media. There's a lot of money that could be saved. A very, very controversial view, and obviously this has annoyed a lot of people. It's a very divisive debate. Fellow Tory MP Simon Clarke has also defended his claim, saying that nurses using food banks are not budgeting properly, referring to the fact that people on £35,000 a year need to use food banks. Do they really? It's a huge debate. I know Lee is a big part of the GBNEWS family. It's a very controversial view, but I mean, does he have a point? I mean,
it definitely has to be talked about. You have to ask questions about whether or not, if you're giving stuff out for free, will people come? You build the ark, they will come. Or are there hoops that you have to jump through to prove that you need it?
Sorry, Dawn, I don't want to talk over you.
How bloody dare you talk over me? Which is mansplaining again.
No, but the difficult... Shut up,
Go on, get on with
it.
No, I was just going to say, it's if we don't talk about it, we're never going to get to the bottom of the situation. And I do think I'm not saying that food banks are wrong and people don't use them really, but we do have to accept there are some people in this world who will take advantage. And until we acknowledge that fact and be free to talk about it, like Lee has quite rightly raised this issue, everyone immediately screeches you down. But unless you talk about something, you're never going to sort the problem out.
Yeah, you should be allowed to ask the question.
The difficulty, as I said, but even the person that takes advantage has to be in a position where taking advantage is an advantage. And it's very difficult when you got, and I don't know Lee Anderson, probably a lovely lad, a lovely man, should I say, but if he's a politician, he's on 84 grand a year. Someone on 84 grand a year plus, talking about somebody who's on 36 grand a year who goes to the food bank, it's just not a good look. We have got to have the argument, the discussion, I do understand that, but it's just not a good look because you don't know where the shoe pinches.
Pot calling kettle black. In the Star, the head of Tesco talks about food manufacturing companies, accuses them of being greedy, hiking prices for no good reason. The reason I say this is these are the people who absolutely turn farmers into the ground.
100%
they absolutely squeeze. And, I don't think any supermarket is a friend of farming and local produce and whatever. But, however, what is his gripe, Chris?
So you're smack on. I'm right down the line with you there. It's, again, not a good look. The supermarkets squeeze the suppliers, they squeeze the producers. They rinse every single bit of profit out of that. In the pandemic, it was the retailers, they had what's called a double peak. They had the peak in 2019 of Christmas, and then they had an even bigger peak of profits in the...
panic buying and hoarding food and all this sort of thing.
So they really creamed it.
So they basically, I'm trying to think of another word here, but they basically can... I've got one word in my mind which I can't say, but basically they can turn the screw on food manufacturers, except they can't with the Heinz and the Kellogg's and the whatever it happens to be, and they don't like it because obviously Tesco and supermarkets like them think there's only one person should be making profits or one company, and that's their company.
Yeah, exactly. And they're fighting back. I mean, like you said, Unilever, Hellmann's 42% increase, Heinz soup 73% increase. So there's some naughty profiteering going on, but the whole industry needs regulation. And I know it's regulated, but they're not doing a good job. Labour's Sir Chris Bryant branded it shameless profiteering. It's clear that shameless profiteering has gone on in the retail sector, and it's
But the war in Ukraine and whatever, wheat prices, supply problems, whatever, put pressure on all these companies, there's no doubt. And
yes.
if you've ever gone into a restaurant recently, you will see the massive increase in price.
Very much so, yeah.
But that being taken into account, though, you know, the energy is coming down, inflation is looking like it's going to come down. Do you think the prices that they put them up to now, do you think they'll come down commensurately in the future? No, they're up there.
Yeah.
You've paid for it, and you'll continue to pay for it.
I just want to ask Chris, how has it affected the price of pineapple and sausages?
Oh, she's gone there again.
Question for another day. Got to cut across, you guys, because we've got Jonathan Reynolds, who's the Shadow Business Secretary here, because